The morning sun cast long shadows across the ancient ruins as Trell carefully made his way through the crumbling structures. Dust particles danced in the beams of light that broke through the collapsed ceiling. The young Vailni scientist adjusted his breathing mask and continued deeper into what his people called the Ancestors' Vault, a massive complex of technology from a forgotten era of their civilization. Trell's four-fingered hands brushed away centuries of dust from a control panel. His pale blue skin contrasted with the dark metal of the ruins. Unlike most of his colleagues who preferred to study the past from the comfort of their laboratories, Trell believed in fieldwork. He wanted to touch history, not just read about it. "Find anything interesting today?" The voice came through his communication device, slightly distorted by the thick walls surrounding him. "Not yet, Director Mira," Trell replied, "but I'm deeper in the eastern section than anyone has gone before. The structural support seemed stronger here." Director Mira had been his mentor for 5 cycles, ever since Trell joined the Historical Technology Division. She believed in his unusual methods, even when others thought his expeditions were a waste of resources. "Remember, you have until sunset before the security team pulls you out," she reminded him. "Safety protocols." "I understand," Trell said, though he had no intention of leaving until he found something worthwhile. 3 hours later, his patience was rewarded. Behind a partially collapsed wall, Trell discovered a sealed chamber. The door was made of a material their modern tools couldn't identify, another mystery from their past. What made this find especially interesting was the lack of dust inside. The room was somehow preserved, as if time had forgotten this small corner of history. In the center stood a pedestal with a device unlike anything Trell had seen before. It was roughly the size of his torso, with smooth curves and no visible controls. The metal gleamed with an inner light that pulsed slowly, suggesting it still had power after all these centuries. "Director Mira," Trell called excitedly, "you need to see this." Within the hour, a team of senior scientists filled the small chamber. They brought scanning equipment and recording devices, all focused on the mysterious object. "Remarkable," Director Mira whispered. Her eyes, wide and reflective like all Vailini, captured the soft glow of the device. "It's still operational after all this time." "But what is it?" asked one of the other scientists. Trell pointed to markings along the base of the device. "These symbols don't match any known Vailini language. I believe this might be evidence of—" "Don't say it," warned the oldest scientist present, Professor L. "We've been through this before. There is no conclusive evidence that our ancestors had contact with other worlds." Director Mira stepped between them. "Whatever its origin, this device clearly has significance. We'll transport it to the Central Research Facility for proper study." 2 days later, the device sat in the center of the main laboratory. Trell and a team of technicians had been running tests around the clock, trying to understand its purpose without damaging it. "The power source is unlike anything in our current technology," Trell explained to Director Mira during her morning visit. "It generates energy without any fuel we can detect. And look at this." He pointed to a holographic display showing the device's internal structure. "These components seem designed to receive and transmit signals, but at frequencies we don't use in any of our communication systems." "Could it be a specialized research tool from the Advanced Era?" Mira suggested. The Advanced Era was what Vailni historians called the Golden Age of their civilization, roughly 2,000 years ago. Records from that time were fragmented, but they showed a society far more technologically advanced than the present. "Maybe," Trell said, though he didn't sound convinced. "But why design it to communicate on frequencies that nothing else would receive?" That evening, after most of the staff had left, Trell remained in the lab. He had been developing a theory that the device might activate if exposed to specific energy patterns. After several failed attempts, he modified one of their scanning tools to emit a particular pulse sequence. When the pulse hit the device, something unexpected happened. The soft glow brightened suddenly, and panels that had been invisible slid open to reveal an intricate control surface. "It worked," Trell whispered to himself, quickly recording the event with his personal data pad. The controls were unlike standard Valeni interfaces. Instead of thought recognition surfaces, these seemed designed for physical interaction. Cautiously, Trell touched what appeared to be the main control area. The device hummed to life. Symbols appeared above it in a holographic display, shifting and changing rapidly. Trell didn't recognize the language, but the pattern suggested some kind of countdown or activation sequence. "This can't be good," he muttered, trying to find a way to shut it down. When pressing other controls didn't work, he tried repeating the energy pulse in reverse. The device gave a sudden high-pitched tone. The glow intensified to almost blinding brightness, then settled into a steady pulsing rhythm. A beam of energy shot upward from the top of the device, passing through the ceiling as if it weren't there. Alarms began blaring throughout the facility. Security teams rushed into the lab moments later, followed by Director Mira still wearing her evening clothes. "What happened?" she demanded, looking at the now active device. "I found a way to activate it," Trell admitted, "but I can't shut it down." The facility's monitoring system showed something alarming. The device was broadcasting a powerful signal directly into space, stronger than any communication technology the Valeni currently possessed. "It's some kind of transmitter," Professor L said, arriving out of breath. "The signal is already beyond our solar system and continuing outward." "Can we block it?" Director Mira asked. "Not with our technology," Lauren replied grimly. "Whatever this is, it was built by minds that understood principles we haven't rediscovered yet." For 3 days, the device continued broadcasting. The Valeni government was informed, and security around the research facility increased. Scientists worked in shifts trying to deactivate the device or at least understand its message. On the 4th day, the device shut down on its own. The controls receded back into the smooth surface and the glow dimmed to its original soft pulse. It completed its transmission, Trell told the emergency committee that had formed. "Whatever message it was designed to send has been delivered." "But to whom?" asked the government representative. "And what did it say?" Trell looked at the silent device. "I don't know, but somewhere out there, someone or something might have heard it. After thousands of years," Professor Lawrence scoffed. "Unlikely." Director Mira wasn't so certain. "The universe is vast and full of possibilities we haven't imagined. Let's hope whatever was listening is friendly." As the meeting disbanded, Trell stayed behind in the lab. He placed his hand on the ancient device and wondered about the minds that had created it. Had they left it as a means to call for help, or was it something else entirely? Little did he know that across the vast emptiness of space, the signal was already being received. And somewhere in the darkness between stars, ships were changing course. 1 week after the mysterious device had sent its signal, life on Valen continued without disruption. The incident was classified as a scientific curiosity, and public attention shifted to the upcoming Harvest Festival. Only a small team led by Trell and Director Mira remained dedicated to studying the ancient transmitter, which had returned to its dormant state. In the darkness beyond Valen's twin moons, something large and ominous entered the edge of the solar system. Its hull was black as space itself, designed to absorb rather than reflect light. Smaller craft surrounded it like insects around a queen. This was the Ravager, flagship of the Drex scout fleet. Commander Rex stood on the bridge, his scaled skin reflecting the dim red lighting. The Drex were reptilian in appearance, with powerful bodies evolved for combat and survival in harsh environments. Their species had exhausted the resources of their home system generations ago and now survived as nomadic conquerors. "Report," Rex ordered, his voice a low rumble that carried across the bridge. His second-in-command, Officer Vex, approached with a data tablet. "The 4th planet is inhabited, Commander. Moderate technology level, no significant space presence beyond a few orbital stations, no detection systems advanced enough to notice our arrival." Rex's mouth formed what passed for a smile among his kind. "Defenseless, then?" Excellent. What resources? Abundant water, fertile land, mineral deposits, and a stable atmosphere. The civilization appears to have declined from a more advanced state. There are ruins of sophisticated technology, but their current capabilities are limited. This news pleased Rex even more. Declining civilizations often had valuable artifacts and knowledge that could be extracted before the population was processed. The Drex fleet needed fuel, and the natives would provide excellent biological material for their converters. How many ships will we need for the harvest? Rex asked. Vex consulted her data. Their global population is approximately 3 billion. Most are concentrated in 12 major population centers. Our current fleet should be sufficient. Begin preparations. I want landing coordinates for all major cities within one rotation. As the Drex fleet moved closer to Valen, they maintained complete stealth. Their ships used technology designed to absorb sensor waves rather than reflect them. To the Valenese primitive detection systems, they were invisible, but they were not as undetectable as they believed. On one of Valen's research stations, an old astronomer named Dorn noticed something unusual in his observations of the outer system. "That's strange," he muttered to himself, adjusting the settings on his telescope. "The starfield doesn't look right." For 50 years, Dorn had been mapping the stars visible from Valen. He knew the patterns like the lines on his own hands. Now, several stars were being occasionally blocked, as if something large was passing in front of them. He reported his findings to the Planetary Science Council, but they dismissed his concerns as equipment malfunction or atmospheric distortion. Only Trell, who had been invited to the council meeting to discuss the ancient device, showed any interest. "Could I see your observation data?" Trell asked after the meeting. Dorn, grateful for the attention, shared everything he had recorded. "See these patterns. Something is moving out there, something big that doesn't want to be seen." Trell brought the information to Director Mira, who agreed it warranted investigation. They redirected one of the orbital research stations to focus its sensors on the coordinates Dorn had provided. 3 days later, their worst fears were confirmed. The research station sent back images of massive ships approaching Valen, still beyond the orbit of the outer moon, but clearly on an intercept course. "We need to inform the government immediately," Director Mira said, her voice steady despite the fear visible in her eyes. The Valeney High Council convened an emergency session. Representatives from all major regions gathered in the ancient circular chamber that had served as their governing center for centuries. "Could they be responding to the signal from the device?" asked one council member. "Unlikely," Trell responded. "The design of these ships doesn't match any of the symbols on the device, and why would they approach in stealth if they were coming to help?" Before the council could decide on a course of action, every communication system on the planet activated simultaneously. Screens in homes, public spaces, and government buildings showed the same image. A Drex commander, his scaled face filling the frame. "People of the fourth planet," Commander Rex announced, his voice translated by their systems into rough Valen language. "Your world has been claimed by the Drex Collective. You have 2 options: surrender and serve or resist and perish. You have 1 planetary rotation to decide." The transmission ended, leaving the Valeney in shocked silence. In the council chamber, panic erupted. The Valeney had not faced war in over 500 years. Their society had evolved toward cooperation and scientific advancement, leaving behind the weapons and military strategies of their ancestors. "We must evacuate the cities," one council member suggested. "And go where?" another countered. "If these invaders have space travel technology, nowhere on the planet is safe." "Perhaps we can negotiate," offered a third. "Offer them resources in exchange for leaving our people in peace." Director Mira shook her head. "The tone of their message suggests they don't see us as equals worthy of negotiation. They see us as property to be claimed." Throughout the night, the council debated their limited options while the Drex ships moved closer, now visible in the night sky as moving stars. Trell returned to his laboratory where the ancient device still sat, its soft glow pulsing steadily. He placed his hand on its smooth surface. "Did you know this would happen?" he whispered to the silent machine. "Is this why you were created, to warn of dangers like this?" In the morning, the Valny government broadcast their response to the Drex ultimatum. They offered peaceful cooperation and trade, but refused to surrender their sovereignty. It was the most defiant stance they could take given their lack of military options. The response from the Drex was swift. A smaller vessel detached from the main fleet and descended toward Central City, the largest Valny population center. It positioned itself above the government district and fired a single energy weapon. The beam cut through the empty ceremonial plaza, leaving a perfectly circular crater half a mile wide. Another transmission followed. Commander Rex appeared again, looking pleased with himself. "That was uninhabited ground," he said. "The next target will not be. You have 6 hours to reconsider your position." Fear spread across Valen. Some people fled the cities despite having nowhere safe to go. Others gathered in community centers or temples, seeking comfort in numbers. The government issued instructions to remain calm, though they had no plan to offer protection. In his laboratory, Trell worked frantically to understand the ancient device. If it had been created to warn of threats, perhaps it also contained a means to defend against them. Director Mira joined him, bringing with her every expert still willing to work as the deadline approached. "Look at this," Trell said, pointing to a series of symbols that had begun to appear on the device's surface. "These weren't visible before. They started appearing when the Drex ships entered our inner system." "Can you decipher them?" Mira asked. "Not yet, but I think the device is reacting to their presence. It might be trying to tell us something." As the 6-hour deadline neared its end, the Valany prepared for the worst. The Drex ships had spread out to positions above every major city on the planet, ready to begin their assault. Unknown to either the Valini or the Drex, at the very edge of the solar system, space itself began to distort. Something was coming, something far larger and more powerful than the Drex could imagine. The 6-hour deadline given by the Drex was about to expire. On Valen, people huddled in their homes, waiting for whatever would come next. The government had no answer to the Drex ultimatum, no weapons to fight back, no ships to escape. In his laboratory, Trell worked desperately to understand the ancient device. The symbols on its surface continued to change, flowing like water across the metal. "I think it's counting down," he told Director Mira, who hadn't left his side despite evacuation orders. "But counting down to what?" On the bridge of the Ravager, Commander Rex prepared to give the order that would begin the conquest of Valen. The natives had not surrendered, which meant the Drex would take the planet by force. It would be messier this way, but Rex didn't mind. His soldiers needed the practice. "All ships in position," Officer Vex reported. "Weapon systems charged and ready." "Excellent," Rex said. "Begin with their government centers." He was interrupted by an urgent alert from their sensor officer. "Commander, massive energy signatures detected at the edge of the system." Rex turned sharply. "What? Show me." The main screen displayed the outer reaches of the solar system. There, just beyond the orbit of the furthest planet, space itself seemed to bend and twist. Points of light appeared, first one, then 5, then dozens. "What is that?" Rex demanded. "Is it the natives? Do they have hidden defenses?" "Negative, Commander," the sensor officer replied, his scales paling with fear. "These energy signatures don't match anything in Valny technology. They're far more advanced." On the main view screen, the points of light resolved into solid shapes. Ships, enormous warships, were emerging from what appeared to be artificial gateways in space itself. Their design was sleek and purposeful, gleaming silver against the blackness. Each one dwarfed the largest Drex vessel. 53 ships detected, the sensor officer reported, his voice shaking. "The largest is..." "Commander, it's nearly 5 times the size of the Ravager." Rex felt cold fear slide down his spine, but he fought to maintain his composure. "Reconfigure our formation. All ships prepare for possible combat." The Drex fleet, which had been spread out over Valen's major cities, began to regroup. Their black ships moved quickly, forming a defensive pattern above the planet. On Valen, astronomers like Old Dorn noticed the sudden movement of the Drex ships and the new arrivals in the outer system. "Something's happening," Dorn told the Emergency Council through a hurried communication. "The invaders are changing position, and there are new objects appearing near the outer planets." In Trell's laboratory, the ancient device suddenly blazed with light. The symbols on its surface stabilized into a pattern, and a holographic projection appeared above it. The image showed the solar system with Valen at the center. Around it were the Drex ships shown as black dots. Beyond them, approaching rapidly, were larger silver markers. "What are those?" Director Mira asked, pointing to the silver images. Before Trell could answer, the device emitted a series of tones. Then, to their shock, it spoke in an ancient dialect of the Valani language. "Distress signal acknowledged. Response fleet has arrived. Stand by for contact." Trell and Mira stared at each other in disbelief. "The device," Trell whispered. "It wasn't just sending a random signal, it was calling for help." In space, the newcomers' ships accelerated toward Valen with impossible speed. Their formation was precise, military in its organization. At the center was the largest ship, its hull bearing markings in an unknown script and an emblem of a stylized planet with a single moon. On the bridge of this flagship, a tall figure stood watching the tactical display. Admiral Jack Taylor of the Human Confederation Navy had been on a routine patrol when the distress call came through. It had used an emergency channel established centuries ago during humanity's first wave of galactic exploration. "Status report," he ordered. His executive officer, Commander Bell, responded promptly. 50 Drex vessels detected in orbit around the source of the distress signal. Planet shows signs of civilization but minimal space presence. No orbital defenses detected. "Classic Drex tactics," Taylor said grimly. "They target developing worlds with limited defenses, establish communication with the planet. Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the Drex fleet. Put it through." The main screen showed Commander Rex. The Drex leader was trying to look confident, but Taylor had fought their kind before. He could see the fear behind the reptilian eyes. "Unidentified fleet," Rex began. "This system is claimed by the Drex Collective. Your presence here is a violation of our territory. Withdraw immediately." Admiral Taylor allowed himself a small smile. "This is Admiral Taylor of the Human Confederation Navy. We are responding to a distress call from this system under Article 7 of the Galactic Charter. The Drex Collective has no legitimate claim here." "There was no distress call," Rex insisted. "The natives of this world have primitive technology. They are incapable of interstellar communication. Nevertheless, we received one, and now we find you threatening a peaceful world. I suggest you withdraw your forces immediately." Rex's scales darkened with anger. "We will not be ordered about by." Taylor cut the transmission. "They never change," he said to his crew. "Prepare all ships for combat, but hold fire unless fired upon, and continue trying to establish contact with the planet." On Valon, the ancient device had become a communication terminal. It projected a holographic image of a human face, Admiral Taylor's face, into Trell's laboratory. "People of Valen," the image said, speaking in the same ancient dialect the device had used. "I am Admiral Taylor of the Human Confederation. We have received your distress signal and have come to offer assistance against the Drex invasion force. Please respond if you can understand this message." Trell looked at Director Mira, who nodded encouragingly. He stepped forward, nervous but determined. "We understand you," he said, hoping the device would translate his words. "I am Trell, a scientist of Valen. The signal was sent accidentally. We found an ancient device and activated it without understanding its purpose." The human's image seemed to consider this. "Accidental or not, the signal used an emergency protocol established by humans and your ancestors long ago. The Drex are a known hostile species. Will you accept our help?" Before Trell could answer, an alarm sounded from the device's holographic display. In orbit, the Drex had made their decision. Two Drex warships broke formation and accelerated toward the approaching human fleet. They fired energy weapons, striking two of the smaller human vessels. "They've opened fire," Commander Bell reported on the bridge of the Defender. Admiral Taylor's expression hardened. "So be it. All ships, defensive protocols authorized. Disable their weapons and propulsion systems if possible. Priority is protecting Valen." The human fleet's response was swift and overwhelming. Precision energy beams lanced out from multiple ships, striking the Drex vessels that had fired. Instead of exploding, the Drex ships simply went dark, their systems completely disabled by technology far beyond their understanding. On the Ravager, Commander Rex watched in horror as two of his ships were neutralized in seconds. "All ships, full attack," he ordered, panic evident in his voice. "Target their flagship." The remaining Drex vessels opened fire, their weapons blazing across the void. Energy torpedoes and plasma beams converged on the human flagship. When they struck, the humans' defensive shields flared with brilliant blue light, absorbing the attacks without apparent damage. The human counterattack was methodical and precise. One by one, Drex ships lost power, weapons, or propulsion. Some tried to flee, only to find their engines suddenly non-functional. In Trell's laboratory, he and Director Mira watched the battle through the device's holographic display. It showed the overwhelming technological superiority of the human fleet. "They're incredible," Mira whispered. "Where did they come from? How did they get here so quickly?" The image of Admiral Taylor reappeared. "The Drex threat is being neutralized," he informed them. "We request permission to send representatives to your world to discuss the situation further." Trell looked at Mira, who nodded. "We accept," he told the human admiral, "and thank you." As the battle in orbit concluded, the people of Valen emerged from their shelters to see strange lights in the sky. The aftermath of a conflict that would change their world forever. The ancient device, after thousands of years of silence, had called out into the darkness of space, and against all odds, someone had answered. The morning after the battle in orbit, the sky above Central City was filled with unfamiliar shapes. The sleek silver vessels of the human fleet had replaced the threatening black ships of the Drex. While the change brought relief to most Valeni, it also brought uncertainty. One threat had been replaced by an unknown power. In the grand hall of the government complex, the Veleni High Council gathered to prepare for their first official meeting with the humans. The ancient circular chamber with its high dome ceiling and stone columns had witnessed thousands of years of Valeni history. Today, it would witness something unprecedented. "They've requested to land a shuttle in the central plaza," said the council leader, an older Valeni named Pax. His blue skin had faded to a pale aqua with age, and the ridge along his head had whitened. "I've granted permission." Director Mira stood nearby with Trell. As the ones who had made first contact through the ancient device, they had been invited to the meeting. "What do we know about them?" asked a council member nervously. "Very little," Mira admitted. "The device refers to them as humans from a confederation. They appear to be an advanced spacefaring civilization with remarkable military technology, and they claim to have had contact with our ancestors." Trell added, "The device used language patterns from our ancient texts, suggesting it was designed for communication between our species." Outside, a crowd had gathered in the streets despite government requests to remain indoors. The Valeni were a curious people by nature, and the events of the past day had sparked both fear and wonder. At precisely the agreed time, a small craft descended from the largest human ship. Unlike the utilitarian design of the Drex vessels, this shuttle moved with grace. It was silver like its mother ship, with blue markings that caught the sunlight. It made almost no sound as it lowered to the plaza stones. The High Council watched through the large windows as the shuttle settled. A moment of tense silence followed. Then a door on the side of the craft slid open. A ramp extended to the ground. 3 figures emerged. They walked upright on two legs like the Valeni, but their appearance was strikingly different. Their skin tones ranged from light beige to dark brown without the blue tint of Valeni skin. They had hair on their heads in various colors. Their faces had more pronounced features, with external ears and noses that protruded more than those of the Valeni. The leader wore a white uniform with gold and blue markings on the shoulders. Behind him came a female in a similar uniform, and a third human in gray clothing who carried various devices. Trell studied them with scientific curiosity. "They are remarkably similar to us in basic structure," he whispered to Director Mira. "Bilateral symmetry, upright posture, forward-facing eyes, but the differences are fascinating." "Focus, Trell," Mira reminded him. "This is a diplomatic meeting, not a research opportunity." The humans were escorted into the grand hall by ceremonial guards. The Valeni guards seemed small next to the humans, who stood a head taller than most of the blue-skinned natives. Council leader Pax stepped forward. "Welcome to Valon. I am Pax, leader of the High Council. We thank you for your assistance against the Drex." The human in the white uniform inclined his head slightly. "Admiral Jack Taylor of the Human Confederation Navy. This is Commander Bell, my executive officer, and Dr. Reed, our xenolinguist and cultural specialist." Trell noticed that the Admiral spoke perfect Valeni without any translation device visible. The ancient device in the laboratory must have shared language data with the humans. "We have many questions," Pax said, gesturing to seats arranged in the center of the chamber. "As do we," Admiral Taylor replied, taking a seat. "But first, I should explain our presence here." The Admiral recounted how the human fleet had received a distress signal using an emergency protocol established thousands of years ago. The signal had contained identification markers specific to Valen, triggering an automatic response under long-standing agreements. "Agreements our people have no record of," Mira pointed out. "That doesn't surprise me," Dr. Reed said, speaking for the first time. Her voice was softer than the Admiral's, but carried clearly in the chamber. "Based on our preliminary scans of your world, your civilization appears to have experienced what we call a regression event approximately 2,000 years ago." "The Great Darkness," whispered one of the council members. Dr. Reed nodded. "In your historical records, you refer to it as the Great Darkness, a period when much of your advanced technology and historical knowledge was lost. Before that time, your people were part of a multi-species alliance that included early human colonies." This revelation sent murmurs through the council chamber. The Great Darkness was a well-documented historical period when Valen had suffered catastrophic natural disasters. But the idea that their ancestors had been part of an interstellar alliance was new. Trell couldn't contain his questions any longer. "The device I found, it was communication technology from that era, left behind in case it was needed." "Precisely," Admiral Taylor confirmed. "When our species first encountered each other, we established emergency protocols. The device you activated was one of several placed on your world as a safeguard. It was designed to survive even if your civilization lost its space technology." "Which is exactly what happened," Mira said, understanding dawning on her face. "The Drex," Pax said, bringing the conversation back to the immediate threat. "Who are they, and will they return?" Admiral Taylor's expression grew serious. "The Drex are a predatory species from a system about 30 light-years from here. Their home world was rendered uninhabitable by their own actions centuries ago. Now they survive as nomadic raiders, conquering less advanced worlds for resources." "Would they have destroyed us?" asked a council member. "Not completely," Commander Bell answered, her voice matter-of-fact. "The Drex typically eliminate resistance, then enslave the remaining population. They would have stripped your world of resources and used your people as labor until the planet was no longer useful." A heavy silence fell over the chamber as the Valeni absorbed this information. "As for whether they will return," Admiral Taylor continued, "the Drex commander escaped with a few ships. They will likely report to their main fleet. It is probable they will attempt to return with greater numbers. Fear showed on the faces of the council members. After a moment, Pax spoke again. Then we are still in danger. Our world has no defenses against such threats. Admiral Taylor nodded slowly. That is one of the matters I wish to discuss. The Human Confederation has obligations under our ancient treaties with your people. Those agreements may have been forgotten here, but we maintain our records carefully. What kind of obligations? Mira asked. Mutual defense, technological exchange, cultural cooperation, the standard provisions of Confederation alliance agreements. If your government is willing, we propose to reinstate those agreements. The implications were enormous. Alliance with an advanced spacefaring civilization would change everything for Valen. And if we decline, Pax asked carefully, we would still offer immediate protection against the Drex, Taylor said without hesitation. We do not abandon people to conquerors regardless of treaty status, but a formal alliance would allow for long-term cooperation and development. The council members exchanged glances. This was too important a decision to make immediately. We will need time to consider this proposal, Pax said finally. Of course, Admiral Taylor agreed. In the meantime, with your permission, we will maintain a defensive position around your planet. As the formal meeting concluded, Admiral Taylor approached Trell directly. You're the scientist who activated the beacon, he said. Trell nodded, feeling suddenly nervous under the human's direct gaze. It was an accident. I didn't know what it would do. Accidents sometimes lead to the most important discoveries, Taylor said with a smile. Your curiosity may have saved your world. Trell considered this, or put it in danger. The Drex might never have found us if not for the signal. The Drex were already mapping this sector, Commander Bell interjected. They would have discovered Valen eventually, but without the beacon, we wouldn't have known to come. As the humans prepared to return to their shuttle, Dr. Reed handed Trell a small device. This contains historical records about the early relations between our peoples, she explained. You might find it illuminating. Trell accepted the device with trembling hands. It represented knowledge that had been lost to his people for millennia. That evening, as the human ships moved into defensive positions around Valen, Trell sat in his laboratory studying the information Dr. Reed had provided. The ancient device, now quiet again, sat nearby. The lost history of his world was gradually revealing itself, and with it the promise of a very different future. 3 days after the arrival of the human fleet, Valen was transforming. Small teams of humans had established temporary bases in several locations with the permission of the High Council. Their presence brought a mixture of excitement, curiosity, and lingering unease among the Valeni population. In the hills overlooking Central City, a human defensive installation hummed with activity. Sleek sensor arrays scanned the depths of space, watching for any sign of returning Drex forces. Admiral Taylor had assured the Council that the human fleet would intercept any threat long before it reached the planet, but no one was taking chances. Trell stood on a viewing platform of the human flagship Defender which now orbited Valen. Through the transparent walls, he could see his home world below, the vast blue oceans, the green-tinged continents, and the scattered lights of cities. From this perspective, it looked small and vulnerable. It's quite a view, isn't it? Admiral Taylor said, joining him on the platform. I never imagined seeing my world like this, Trell admitted. Our space program had only achieved orbit with small research stations. Nothing like, he gestured around at the massive human vessel. Your people were once capable of building ships that would make this one look primitive, Taylor said. The historical records show that Valeni engineering was highly advanced, particularly in propulsion systems. This revelation still amazed Trell. In the past few days, he had spent hours studying the historical data the humans had provided. The story it told was both inspiring and tragic. According to human records, the Valeni had been among the first spacefaring civilizations in this sector of the galaxy. They had encountered early human exploration ships about 3,000 years ago, and formed one of humanity's first interspecies alliances. The partnership had flourished for centuries until a series of natural disasters, the Great Darkness of Valeni history, had devastated their civilization. The Council is meeting today to vote on the alliance proposal, Trell said, changing the subject. Director Mira thinks it will pass, but there's still resistance from some regions. Taylor nodded. That's to be expected. We've appeared suddenly in your skies with technology far beyond your current capabilities. Some caution is natural and healthy. On the planet below, the High Council had indeed convened for what many were calling the most important vote in modern Valeni history. The circular chamber was packed with regional representatives who normally participated remotely, having traveled to attend in person. Director Mira sat beside Council Leader Pax, reviewing her notes. As head of the Historical Technology Division, and one of the first to make contact with the humans, her opinion carried significant weight. The final report from the verification team, Pax said quietly, sliding a data tablet toward her. Mira scanned the information. A team of Valeni scientists and historians had spent days cross-referencing the human historical records with their own artifacts and ancient texts. Their conclusion was clear. It aligns with our findings, she confirmed. The symbols on ancient ruins in the Western Desert match exactly with the early human Confederation emblems, and the linguistic analysis shows that at least 300 words in our ancient language have human origins. Pax nodded, then stood to call the chamber to order. The debate that followed was passionate but respectful, as was the Valeni way. Those in favor of alliance pointed to the Drex threat and the opportunities for advancement. Those against worried about cultural contamination and potential domination by a more powerful civilization. When all views had been expressed, Pax called for the vote. Representatives pressed their palms to the sensing plates before them, registering their positions. The central display showed the results immediately, 76% in favor of alliance. The proposal is accepted, Pax announced formally. Valen will join the Human Confederation as an allied world under the terms negotiated. Aboard the Defender, Admiral Taylor received the news with a satisfied nod. Please inform the Council that I'll attend the signing ceremony personally, he told his communications officer. Commander Bell approached with a data tablet. Sir, long-range sensors have detected multiple hyperspace signatures at the edge of the detection grid. Configuration matches Drex vessels. Numbers? Taylor asked, his demeanor shifting instantly from diplomatic to military. At least 30 ships, larger classes than the scout fleet we encountered. They're still outside the system, possibly gathering for an attack. Taylor turned to Trell, who had overheard the exchange. It seems your council's decision comes just in time. The Drex are returning and in greater force. Trell's four-fingered hands tightened on the railing. We should warn the planet. We will, but there's no need for panic. The defenses we've established are designed to handle much larger threats than this. Taylor turned back to Bell. Deploy the fleet to intercept. Alert all ships to prepare for combat operations. The human response was swift and coordinated. Ships that had been in orbit around Valen moved outward to form a defensive perimeter. Others emerged from behind Valen's moons, where they had been stationed as reserves. On the planet, news of the approaching Drex fleet spread quickly. But unlike the fear that had gripped the population during the first encounter, the reaction now was more measured. The presence of human defenders provided a sense of security that had been absent before. In the central government complex, a historic ceremony was underway despite the looming threat. Admiral Taylor and Council Leader Pax stood before representatives from both civilizations. Between them, on a ceremonial table, lay an agreement, the alliance treaty between Valen and the Human Confederation. This document, Pax said to the assembled witnesses, restores an ancient bond between our peoples, a bond that survived millennia of separation waiting to be rediscovered. Admiral Taylor nodded. The Confederation welcomes Valen back into the community of allied worlds. Your journey forward begins today. They each pressed their hand to the document, 5 fingers beside 4, activating the embedded verification technology. The treaty glowed briefly, then settled into its final form. As the ceremony concluded, Commander Bell approached Taylor and whispered something in his ear. The Admiral excused himself and stepped aside with Trell and Director Mira. "The Drex fleet has entered the system," he informed them quietly. "They're approaching in an attack formation." "Should we delay the public announcement of the alliance?" Mira asked, concerned. Taylor shook his head. "On the contrary, let's move it forward. I want the Drex to hear it." Minutes later, a joint transmission from human and Velini leadership was broadcast across all channels, directed outward toward the approaching Drex fleet as well as to the Velini population. "This is Admiral Jack Taylor of the Human Confederation Navy and Council Leader Pax of Valen. As of today, Valen is a protected world under the Confederation Charter. Any hostile action against this planet will be considered an act of war against the entire Confederation." In the lead Drex vessel, Commander Rex received the transmission with growing dismay. The scout ships that had escaped the previous encounter had reported the human intervention, but Rex had been confident that a larger force would prevail. Now, his tactical display showed not only the human defensive fleet, but also newly activated weapon platforms around Valen's moons. His intelligence had failed to detect these hidden defenses. "Commander," his sensor officer reported nervously, "we're detecting energy buildups in the human fleet. Their weapons are powered and locked on our position." Rex considered his options. The Drex were aggressive but not suicidal. Fighting the humans here in a system they were clearly prepared to defend would result in destruction. "Send a message," he ordered. "The Drex Collective acknowledges Valen as Human Confederation territory. We will withdraw." On the Defender's bridge, Taylor received the Drex response with a grim smile. "Keep all weapons locked until they're beyond the outer planets," he ordered. "The Drex aren't known for their honesty." Trell, who had been invited to observe from the bridge, watched in amazement as the Drex fleet slowly turned away. "They're actually leaving," he said, hardly believing it. "For now," Taylor cautioned. "The Confederation has had dealings with the Drex before. They respect strength and little else, but they'll think twice before returning to a world under our protection." As the immediate threat receded, attention on Valen turned to the future. Human technical teams began working with Valeni scientists to improve planetary infrastructure. The knowledge exchange that had been interrupted thousands of years ago resumed, with adjustments for the current state of Valeni society. 1 week after the Alliance ceremony, Trell stood in his laboratory, carefully packing the ancient communication device. Admiral Taylor had requested it be moved to a new joint research facility being established near Central City. Director Mira entered as he was securing the protective casing around the device. "The transport team is ready when you are," she said. Then, noticing his thoughtful expression, she added, "What's on your mind?" "I was just thinking about coincidences," Trell replied. "If I hadn't found this device, if I hadn't activated it accidentally, the Drex would have found us eventually," Mira finished for him. "But we would have faced them alone." Trell nodded, placing his hand on the device one last time. "Our ancestors left us a lifeline reaching across thousands of years. They couldn't save themselves from the great darkness, but they made sure we wouldn't face the galaxy's dangers alone." Outside the laboratory windows, a human shuttle passed overhead, followed by a newly constructed Valeni aircraft using adapted human technology. The sky that had once seemed so empty now buzzed with activity and possibility. "The Council has approved your appointment, by the way," Mira said as they walked toward the exit. "Official ambassador to the Human Confederation. You'll be leaving for Earth next month." Trell stopped, startled. "Me, but I'm a scientist, not a diplomat." "Who better to represent us? You found the device. You made first contact. Besides," she added with a small smile, "your curiosity about humans is already legendary." As they stepped outside into the sunlight, Trell looked up at the sky where the faint outline of the Defender could still be seen in orbit. An accidental signal had called out into the darkness of space, and against all odds, it had been answered. not by the threat they had feared, but by friends they hadn't known they had. The ancient alliance was renewed, and Valen's future among the stars had begun again.